Senator Peterson will now speak about her experiences with this kind of legislation in Delaware.
Thank you, Marcy, and good morning. I wanted to begin by thanking Professor Hamilton for inviting me to take part in this call to action to lift statutes of limitations in child sexual abuse cases. Professor Hamilton played such a key role in the passage of Delaware's law that I jumped at the opportunity to come here today to support the work that she has done nationally and to support the ongoing efforts of Representative Markey here in the state of New York. And I came to urge other legislative bodies, both state and federal, to act now to give victims of child sexual abuse access to justice that they've been denied for far too long. A few weeks ago, one of my best friends from childhood lost her son in a motorcycle accident. And I went to the funeral to pay my respects, and she hugged me, and she said, by the way, thanks for that bill that you got passed. And I said, which one? She said, the one about sex abuse. She said, you know, my stepfather molested me my whole childhood. He committed the crime, and she has paid the price in more ways than one for her entire life. During the past 2 years since our journey in Delaware began, I've lost track of the number of people who have told me the same thing that my friend said. People from all over the country, and in fact some from other countries, have written to me or called me to say, this is what happened to me, and this is what it did to my life. Some are in prison, many are alcoholics and drug addicts, and some are parents of victims who committed suicide. Although each story is different, they're all the same in one respect. The victim is paying the price, while the molester gets a pass because of woefully inadequate statutes of limitations laws. As Matt said earlier, Delaware had one of those laws. We had a 2-year statute of limitations. And it was 2 years from the date of the abuse. And since the average age of the abused child is 9, in Delaware you had until you were 11 to go find an attorney to bring action in court. But we know that wasn't going to happen. And it didn't happen. And so we had that kind of a law in the books until Senate Bill 29, the Child Victims Act, was signed into law on July 10th. But what Senate Bill 29 did was it repealed the statute of limitations in civil cases entirely. So going forward, you can sue 30 years from now for something that happens today. So going forward, there is no longer any civil statute of limitations. We had already done that under our criminal law 3 years ago. We also put in a 2-year window. A 2-year window allows victims to come forward. Again, no matter how long ago the abuse occurred, they have a 2-year period to come forward and bring their suit. Getting the bill passed in Delaware, even though we're a little tiny state, it wasn't easy. And in a lot of ways, being a little state makes it harder because everybody knows everybody else. In fact, sometimes I think everybody's related. I'm not a native Delawarean, so I can say that. But getting it passed, in fact, the first bill did not make it. House Bill 450, which we introduced 2 or 3 years ago, did not make it. It died at the end of the General Assembly on June 30th, never having been voted on in the House. But we learned from our mistakes in that case, and we learned how to come back and do it better. And that process began for me by scrapping the first bill, which had been amended beyond recognition anyway. And I sat down and I said, if I had my druthers, what would this bill say? And so I sat down and I wrote it exactly the way I wanted it to read. And that is, repeal the statute going forward, 2-year window, looking back, come forward, everybody gets their case on the table. And that's exactly what we introduced, and it's exactly what we ended up with. And Lucky for us, people like Professor Hamilton and Father Tom Doyle, people of courage and people of conviction, were willing to come to Delaware. And they came time after time. They sat through boring committee meetings in some cases, or on the floor of the Senate and the House as the bill went through its process, just as they were willing to help us. We from Delaware, and there are 4 of us here today, and besides me, there's Matt and Matt's mother, Martha, Condy over there, and Sister Maureen. These were people who put everything in their lives aside to fight for this bill. We're willing to share our experiences with you on an individual basis, if you like, as you work through the process. We can tell you what worked for us and what didn't work for us, because we too are a very Catholic state. And I'm from a very Catholic family, so I didn't make any friends in my family. I keep waiting for them to refuse communion, but they haven't done that yet. My sister and niece have a bet as to what date my excommunication. Along the way, we did hit some bumps in the road. You know, and some days I felt like I was at the boardwalk playing whack-a-mole. You know, they came for your whole little club and the moles pop up and you have to, get the sound for that one. It felt like whack-a-mole on a daily basis. You know, the Catholic Diocese of Wilmington would pop up and we'd have to beat back their propaganda, and then the insurance industry would pop up over here and we'd have to beat them, and then the trial lawyers would come up over here, and every day was just beating down the moles. And that's how it went. It went that way every single day. We just never knew from day to day what surprises were in store for us. But no matter what happened from day to day, my friend Matt Condy would very quietly remind us that it's about the children. It's about the children. So when I would be busy worrying about what the church was up to or the insurance industry, Matt would just say, don't forget, it's about the children. And that would bring everything back into focus for me. And at the train station this morning while we were waiting for our train to bring us here, I ran into an old friend who asked where I was headed, and I told him where and why. And he said, well, I guess that doesn't happen much anymore, huh? That's about sexual abuse. I said, are you kidding? I know he was sorry he said anything. Are you kidding? It's an epidemic. It is an epidemic. 1 in 5, depending on which study you look at, some have said 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 6 boys, I've seen others say 1 in 5, are sexually molested. If we were talking about, that's why this call to action is so important. The victims of child sexual abuse are hungry for justice. Justice that they've been denied for way too long. Justice they were denied because they were too young to know what was happening to them and too young to know the long-term effects it would have on their lives. It's time to give them a voice. It's time to give them a chance to tell their stories, to confront their abusers in a court of law, and to finally get justice. And I'm here today to urge the state of New York and other states in our region, so that people can't just run across state lines and get away with it, to put the welfare of our children ahead of our political self-interest. You know, I had people say to me, oh, I can't do that, you know, I'm a Catholic. It's a lie. So were the victims, by the way. So were the victims. The victims were our children. They were our kids. But we have to put the children ahead of our political self-interest, to stand up to the powerful institutions who care more about their balance sheets than they do about the children whose lives they ruined. I remember reading one quote from one of the mothers in Philadelphia who said, they threw our kids to the wolves. Well, it's time that we have the courage as legislators to stand up to those who threw our kids to the wolves. I urge New York and other surrounding states to do the right thing. Repeal statute of limitations for child sexual abuse cases and give these children, these victims, both young and old, a shot at justice. And just remember along the way that it's not about us, the legislators, the elected officials. It's not about the church. It's not about the insurance industry. It's about the children. Let's do the right thing for the children.